Hello and welcome to People in Profit. I'm Charles Pellegrin. And as the representatives and leaders of over 50 African countries meet this September in Beijing for the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, or FOCAC, we'll take a closer look at that China-Africa relationship and what it means in terms of opportunities for economic growth and development, as well as potential risks and limitations. Trade between the two continues to grow, reaching $282 billion in 2023, but the nature of the economic engagement between the two has gradually shifted. Gone are the days of huge Chinese infrastructure loans and investments in Africa, leaving way to more targeted engagement. Between 2013 and 2018, Chinese loans to Africa always exceeded the $10 billion mark every year, reaching a peak in 2016 before falling. In contrast, in 2023, Chinese lenders issued 13 new commitments with a value of $4.61 billion to 8 countries and 2 regional financial institutions. Nevertheless, this represents the largest volume of lending since the COVID pandemic. Well, to share their insights on this very important relationship, we're joined on the line by development economist Anzetse Vere out of Nairobi. Thank you so much for being with us.
Happy to be here. Nice to see you.
And we're also joined by CGTN reporter and China-Africa researcher at Zhejiang Normal University, Shen Shiwei, who is based out of Beijing. Thank you very much as well.
Thank you for having me here.
So this is a question I'll put to both of you. As I mentioned in the introduction, in 2023, Chinese loans to African countries have hit their highest levels since the COVID pandemic. How do we interpret that fact? I'll start with you, Anzetse.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think what this is an evolving of the economic relations. As I've said before, China has had about a 20-year engagement with the continent. And I think as that relationship happens, there are certain things that one learns, both parties understand better. And so what you're seeing really now is an evolving and a maturing of that economic relation, and understanding the role of economics and finance systems, but also diplomacy systems in terms of the partnerships that both sides are deploying in their statecraft. So I don't see this as a cause for alarm. I see this rather as a welcome maturity of a relationship that had been defined by very big ticket items. But I think as the learning curve on both sides goes up, we'll begin to see more strategic, targeted, and perhaps even more powerful engagements. But it may not be as large scale, but nevertheless very useful.
Shen Shiwei, what's your take on where this trajectory of the China-Africa relationship has been going?
I think that reflects a strong China and Africa economic cooperation, especially now we know the modernization and the industrialization and also agricultural industrialization has been prioritized by both sides. As we know, during the FOCAC Beijing summits, a lot of African leaders, they talk with Chinese leaders and also the different departments, ministries about how to push forward the industrialization. And so all this has reflected China-Africa cooperation, especially for this comprehensive one, now has entered into another new chapter. So this is my observation from Beijing.
So I'll turn to Anzetse Vere for this next question. And Shen Shiwei alluded to it earlier. Scaling up the value of African exports to China has been a major talking point at FOCAC summits in the past. And at this one as well, we heard Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa bring that issue up again this time around. The data, though, still shows that, by and large, the dynamic and the trade relationship between Africa and China is still one where primary resources leave Africa and manufactured goods leave China to Africa. Realistically, how much can we expect that particular dynamic to change?
Well, that relationship is reflective of Africa's trade ties with just about every European and North American actor as well. And sort of speaks to the place of Africa in global value chains. Now, of course, you know, China is a key actor in global value chains. And so sort of narrowing it to an Africa-China relationship, I think, is not really giving the full picture. Now, what's happening really in Africa is you're seeing an impetus and a real drive towards industrialization. But when you're looking at the process of building out your manufacturing capabilities, et cetera, a key component of that is renegotiating where you sit in global value chains and building the capabilities to allow you to travel in the place in global value chains that you feel is more appropriate for you as a continent. Now, of course, the big elephant in the room that nobody wants to discuss, whether this is with China and Africa, or in fact, more seriously with Europe, North America, and Africa, is what does this mean for business in those parts of the world as Africa seeks to graduate up the global value chain. Now, there are obviously internal dynamics as well, such as, African industrial policy. Frankly, the fiscal space in most African countries, it's not there. And obviously, this new angle of green industrialization, green finance, which is very welcome and very important. And the other elephant in the room is rare earth minerals. So I think you need to bear in mind that FOCAC is sitting within a larger ecosystem of Africa renegotiating its place in global value chains, and in the process, bringing forward a type of statecraft that I think you'll see continuing forward in Africa-China relations as well.
I'll turn to Shen Shuwei for this next one. From a Chinese point of view and from a domestic point of view, it's actually, isn't it politically tricky in a way within the current domestic context in China of a slowing economic growth where internal demand is a bit weaker, to be seen as working to increase economic opportunities abroad? Could this be a stumbling block in this goal to rebalance trade between China and the African continent?
Well, regarding the trade between China and Africa, and also China with Africa with other continents, as our colleagues have also said, the trade structure is quite similar. Africa is exporting a lot of materials and also industrial products to other continents, and also they import a lot of industrial parts. And actually, that is why the industrialization is quite essential in China-Africa cooperation right now, and for the industrialization, the agricultural industrialization, and also about the technology empowerment to boost this kind of cooperation. So actually, from my working experience in many African countries, with the help of China-Africa cooperation in infrastructure and industrialization, actually more African countries now they are start to export more industrial products to other continents, not only China, but also like Europe. For example, in Ethiopia, now they are exporting more clothes than ever with the help of the Chinese investment in their industrial parks and also other infrastructures. So I think in the coming days, the industrialization will further boost the industrialization transition for the African countries, and Africa will have the competitiveness to export more good quality with these kind of industrial products to other countries beyond China and also other continents.
Anzetsevere, what do you make of the role of these industrial parks that have appeared on the continent over the last few decades?
Well, in many ways, they're a legacy from the 1970s and 80s when Africa was newly independent. And then there was sort of a quiet period, and you're seeing a resurgence in that. I think sort of speaking to the gentleman's point, one of the things that people aren't talking about very much, it's very important in Africa-China relations, and you're even seeing this in FOCAC as well, is the role of the Chinese private sector. And when you look at the capabilities in finance, the Chinese private sector itself, without sort of state backing, but really Chinese investors choosing to make decisions to invest on the continent, there are really three things that are important on the manufacturing side. First of all, the share of Chinese private sector in manufacturing is probably the largest. They're bringing significant capabilities in manufacturing that other actors on the continent just hadn't really been able to bring before. I think the other thing you have to bear in mind as we're talking about industrialization is technology and the strategic role of technology and the importance of technology and balancing that with the need for job creation and the immense need for jobs that obviously Africa has. But I think the final point that's very important, that has been quite different in the way the Chinese private sector is engaged, is looking at Africa as a market. There's been this obsession with looking at Europe, North America, and China as markets. But really what we're also seeing from African capitals is a desire to build manufacturing capabilities to service the African market through the African Continental Free Trade Area. So I think you're going to see a blend of how Africa-China engages. There'll be state-to-state agreements. You'll continue to see the private sector bringing in their capabilities, their technology, and their capital. And of course, you'll continue to see the maturing of the African Continental Free Trade Area as Africa better serves itself in terms of manufactured goods.
One last question I'll put to both of you. I'll ask for a quick response to this. An expression that's been used to describe Africa-China economic ties is one of trade, not aid, and that's in contrast to perhaps relationships with either the European Union or the United States. Can you give us a sense, or can you tell us or explain to us what that means to you?
I mean, I can start. I certainly alluded to this in an article that I wrote for the China Project. And the Trade Not Aid call really started back in the 2010s. And I think what this means for China-Africa relations is a continuation of the relationship that's built on that. If you look at state-to-state relations between China and Africa, they've been very much built on commercial financial agreements and looking at business as a core part of how things are done, rather than aid and then other things. So I think as FOCAC continues, you continue to see an evolving of what that means on the Africa side, but also an evolving on the China side and how we can better meet on the trade not aid agenda that's been alive on the continent since the 2010s.
Shen Shuwei, some final thoughts here?
Yes, actually, trade is a very good solution for the job creation and to boost the industrialization. As Chinese President Xi Jinping has reiterated many times, that China is fully supportive for the continental free trade area. And from my experience, and also I post a lot of tweets on my Twitter about how this trade, especially the good quality products export to Chinese markets from Africa, has boosted the local industrialization, especially for the supply chains and also for the other service sectors. So I think trade is one of the best solutions to the economic leap forward for the African continent and many emerging economies.
Shen Shuwei, you're a CGTN reporter and China-Africa researcher at Zhejiang Normal University. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, as well as Anzet Severe, development economist based out of Nairobi. Thank you both for being on People and Profit. Hopefully we'll talk to you again, perhaps on other topics relating to China-Africa. We didn't even get onto the issue of debt distress in many African nations. But that's unfortunately all we have time for this time around. If you want to watch our previous editions, you can do so by searching for People and Profit on the France 24 website or app, or you can listen by finding us on the podcast platform of your choice in the meantime. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned to France 24.